Penicillin. On September 3, 1928, Alexander Fleming came back from holiday and found a dirty dish on his lab bench. That dish should have been thrown away. It was covered with Staphylococcus bacteria, the kind that could cause boils, sore throats, and deadly infections. But near one patch of greenish mold, the bacteria had vanished. That was the strange part. The mold was not just growing, it was killing. Fleming had not planned this. He had not designed a cure. He had left plates in his London laboratory, gone away, and returned to a mistake. Most scientists would have cleaned the dish and moved on. Fleming looked closer. Around the mold was a clear, empty ring. No bacteria survived there. Something from the mold was leaking into the jelly and stopping the bacteria from growing. He called that substance penicillin. But the first version was weak. It was hard to purify. It broke down easily. For years, the discovery sat there like a miracle nobody knew how to use. Then World War II changed everything. Infected wounds were killing soldiers. Doctors needed something stronger than soap, knives, and hope. Scientists in Britain and America worked out how to grow penicillin in huge tanks and turn Fleming's mold into medicine. A dirty dish became the first great antibiotic. One forgotten plate changed the rules of infection. The mold won. And the scary part is this. The biggest medical breakthrough of the century did not begin with a perfect plan. It began with a scientist noticing that one ruined sample was different from every other ruined sample. That was the discovery. X-rays. On November 8, 1895, Wilhelm Röntgen was working alone in a dark laboratory in Würzburg, Germany. The experiment looked boring. A glass tube, electricity, black cardboard, a screen sitting nearby. Röntgen was studying cathode rays, invisible streams inside vacuum tubes. He covered the tube so no normal light could escape. But across the room, a screen began to glow. That should not have happened. Something was passing through the cardboard. Something was crossing the room. Something invisible was hitting the screen like light, but it was not light. Röntgen did not understand it, so he called it X, the unknown ray. Then he started testing what it could pass through. Paper, wood, flesh. Some things blocked it, others did not. When he placed his wife Bertha's hand in the path of the rays, the plate showed her bones and her wedding ring. She reportedly looked at the image and saw her own skeleton. Before this, doctors had to guess what was happening inside the body. A broken bone was hidden under skin. A bullet could disappear into muscle. Surgery could become a blind search. Now the body had a window, but the danger was also invisible. Early X-ray workers did not know radiation could burn skin, damage tissue, or raise cancer risk. Some used it too often, too close, and with almost no protection. The discovery opened medicine. It also taught science a rule. Invisible does not mean harmless. For the first time, a doctor could look under skin without cutting it open. And that made the invisible ray impossible to ignore. Radioactivity? Henri Becquerel thought he was studying sunlight. In February 1896 in Paris, he placed uranium salts on photographic plates wrapped in black paper. The plan was simple. Let the crystals sit in sunlight, then see if they gave off rays like X-rays. Then the weather ruined the experiment. Paris turned cloudy. Becquerel put the plates and uranium away in a drawer. That should have ended it. Days later, he developed the plates anyway, and the image was there. Strong, dark, clear. The uranium had marked the plate in total darkness. No sunlight, no glowing crystal, no outside energy. The material was doing it by itself. That was the terrifying part. The uranium was giving off invisible rays from inside its own atoms, not because it had been charged by the sun, not because it was warm, not because anyone touched it. It was active on its own. This accident opened the door to radioactivity. Marie Curie later gave the phenomenon its name and pushed the work further with Pierre Curie. The research led to radium, polonium, radiation therapy, nuclear physics, and eventually the atomic age. But nobody at first understood the cost. Radioactive materials were handled like ordinary rocks. Scientists carried samples in pockets. Doctors promoted radium products. People painted glowing watch dials with radium paint and pointed their brushes with their lips. A cloudy day exposed a force buried inside matter. The drawer was dark. The atoms were not. This was bigger than a strange plate. It meant matter had a hidden clock inside it, releasing energy without asking permission. That idea changed physics forever. The microwave oven. In 1945, Percy Spencer was not trying to cook lunch. He was working with radar equipment at Raytheon, using a magnetron, a device that produced microwave radiation. Then he noticed something weird. A candy bar in his pocket had melted. The room was not hot. His pocket was not near a stove. But the magnetron had filled the space with energy that made water and fat molecules move fast. That movement created heat. Spencer could have ignored it. Instead, he tested it. He placed popcorn kernels near the equipment. They popped. Then he tried an egg. The egg exploded. That was the moment a military radar part turned into a kitchen machine. The first microwave oven was not small. It was not cute. It was called the Radarange. Early models were almost the size of a refrigerator, weighed hundreds of pounds, needed water cooling, and cost more than a car. Nobody looked at it and thought, this belongs in a normal kitchen. But the physics worked. Microwaves could heat food from inside the food, not by warming a metal pan first. A cold meal could become hot in minutes. A frozen dinner could become normal food without fire. The machine slowly shrank. The price dropped. By the late 20th century, the thing born from radar sat in homes, offices, hotels, dorm rooms, and gas stations. A melted candy bar changed how the world eats. It started as war technology. It ended with leftovers. The dangerous part was never the candy bar. It was the question Spencer asked after it melted. Velcro. In 1941, Georges de Mestral came back from a walk with a problem stuck to his clothes. Burrs. They were clinging to his pants and to his dog's fur. Most people would have pulled them off and thrown them away. He put them under a microscope. That changed everything. The burrs were covered in tiny hooks. Those hooks grabbed loops in fabric and hair. It was not glue. It was not magic. It was shape. Tiny hook catches tiny loop. That was the whole secret. De Mestral saw a fastening system hiding inside a weed. But seeing it was easy. Making it was not. He spent years trying to copy the burr. The material had to stick when pressed together. It had to peel apart without breaking. It had to work again and again. Early versions were ugly. People mocked the idea. Clothing companies were not excited by scratchy strips that sounded like ripping paper. But the design kept improving. Nylon made the hooks stronger, manufacturing became cleaner, and slowly, the strange fastener found places where buttons, laces, and zippers were annoying. Shoes, jackets, medical braces, spacesuits, cable wraps, bags, gear. The accident was not that burrs stuck to him. That had happened to millions of people. The discovery was that he asked why. A weed became a machine. The burrs were annoying. That was why everyone saw them. De Mestral was different because he studied the annoyance instead of just removing it. Safety glass. In the early 1900s, Edouard Benedictus dropped a glass flask in his laboratory. He expected the usual sound. Glass hitting floor, pieces flying everywhere. Another broken object to sweep up. But the flask did not scatter. It cracked, but it held together. That made no sense until he looked closer. The flask had once held cellulose nitrate solution. The liquid had dried inside and left a thin plastic film on the glass. When the flask broke, that invisible layer grabbed the pieces and kept them from spraying across the room. A broken flask had behaved like a trapped spiderweb. At first, it was just a lab curiosity. Then BOCNOC Dictus heard about car crashes. Early cars used ordinary glass. When they crashed, windshields did not just break, they became knives. Drivers and passengers could be cut by long, sharp shards moving at speed. The idea became simple. Put a plastic layer between sheets of glass. If the glass breaks, the plastic holds the pieces in place. He developed laminated safety glass, later known as triplex. It was not adopted everywhere immediately. It was expensive. It was harder to make. But war, aircraft, gas masks, and automobiles slowly proved the point. The best windshield is not the one that never breaks. It is the one that breaks without becoming a weapon. One dropped flask changed the crash. The glass still broke, but it stopped attacking people. That was enough. Mauveine. In 1856, William Henry Perkin was 18 years old and trying to make quinine. Quinine was used against malaria, and natural supplies came from cinchona bark. If a chemist could make it in the lab, it would be huge. Perkin did not make quinine. He made black sludge. The experiment looked like a failure, a messy, sticky, useless failure. Then he cleaned the flask with alcohol and saw purple. Not dull purple. A rich, bright purple that stained silk. That was the twist. Before this, purple dye was expensive. Ancient purple came from sea snails and could take thousands of shells to make a small amount. Purple was the color of royalty, partly because ordinary people could not afford it. Perkin's mistake changed that. His accidental dye, Mauveine, could be made from coal tar chemistry. A failed medicine experiment became a fashion revolution. He patented it in 1856 and built a dye factory while still a teenager. Soon dresses, ribbons, and fabrics in new artificial colors spread through Europe. But the bigger story was not just purple. Mauveine showed that waste from coal could become valuable chemicals. It helped launch the synthetic dye industry, and that industry helped push modern organic chemistry forward. A failed cure created a new world of color. The medicine failed. The stain won. It also changed what a laboratory failure looked like, because sometimes the useless color left in the flask is more valuable than the chemical you were trying to make. Vulcanized rubber. Charles Goodyear spent years chasing rubber that would behave. Natural rubber was useful, but it had a horrible problem. In heat, it turned sticky and soft. In cold, it became hard and cracked. Shoes melted. Coats smelled. Rubber products failed. Investors laughed. Friends lost patience. Goodyear went broke more than once. Then, in 1839, the accident happened. A mix of rubber and sulfur hit a hot stove. Instead of melting into useless gum, it changed. It hardened, but it did not become brittle. It stayed elastic. It could stretch and snap back. Heat had not destroyed it. Heat had fixed it. The sulfur helped build bridges between long rubber molecules. Those bridges stopped the rubber from flowing like sticky tar, but still let it bend and move. That process became vulcanization. The discovery was not just about boots or raincoats. It changed belts, hoses, seals, machines, wires, factories, bicycles, and later cars. Without stable rubber, modern tires would be almost impossible. But Goodyear did not become rich from the discovery in the way people imagine. Patents, lawsuits, debt, and copying followed him for years. The material succeeded faster than the man did. A mistake on a stove helped build the machine age. The rubber survived the heat. And once rubber became reliable, machines could move, seal, roll, and grip in ways they could not before. A stove accident became infrastructure. Teflon. On April 6, 1938, Roy Plunkett opened a gas cylinder and got nothing. That was the problem. He was working at DuPont with tetrafluoroethylene gas, trying to make new refrigerants. The cylinder should have released gas. It did not. The tank seemed empty, but it was too heavy. So Plunkett and his assistant cut it open. Inside was a white waxy powder. The gas had changed by itself. Molecules had linked into long chains, creating polytetrafluoroethylene, later called PTFE. It was strange stuff. Chemicals barely touched it. Heat did not scare it easily. Water did not wet it. Other materials had trouble sticking to it. It was slippery, stubborn, and almost annoyingly stable. At first, nobody was thinking about frying pans. The material was valuable because it could survive harsh chemical conditions. During World War II, it was used in demanding industrial and military work. Later, it moved into wires, seals, medical devices, space equipment, clothing, and non-stick cookware. The accident was easy to miss. A cylinder failed. A researcher could have complained, replaced it, and thrown the problem away. Instead, Plunkett asked why the empty tank was heavy. That question mattered. Sometimes the discovery is not inside the experiment that works. It is inside the equipment that refuses to work. A missing gas became a material that almost nothing wanted to touch. That was the magic of Teflon. Superglue. In 1942, Harry Coover was looking for clear plastic for gun sights. World War II needed materials that were strong, transparent, and useful for weapons. Coover's team studied chemicals called cyanoacrylates. They found something powerful, too powerful. This stuck to everything. It glued instruments. It ruined equipment. It bonded surfaces so fast that it was more annoying than useful. So they rejected it. That was the first mistake. Years later, in 1951, Coover met the same chemical family again while working on heat-resistant polymers for jet canopies. Once again, the material bonded instantly. This time, he understood the failure was actually the product. Cyanoacrylate did not need heat. It did not need heavy pressure. A little moisture on a surface was enough to trigger it. The molecules linked together fast, forming a hard bond in seconds. The thing that ruined lab tools became superglue. It entered the market in the 1950s and became one of those objects people only notice when something breaks. A mug handle, a toy, a model, a cracked piece of plastic. But the same chemistry also found medical uses. Special forms of cyanoacrylate adhesives have been used to close skin wounds and reduce bleeding. The original problem was that it stuck too well. That became the whole point. The failure would not let go. The chemical was rejected because it behaved badly in the lab. Then the world found a use for that bad behavior. Saccharin. In 1879, Konstantin Fahlberg noticed his dinner tasted sweet. Not the food. His fingers? He had been working in Ira Remsen's laboratory at Johns Hopkins University, studying coal tar compounds. At some point, he left the lab without fully washing the chemicals from his hands. Then bread tasted sweet. That should have been a warning. Instead, it became a discovery. Fahlberg went back to the lab and started tasting his samples to find the source. That is not how modern safety rules work. Today, tasting unknown lab chemicals is exactly what you do not do. But in that moment, he found saccharin. It was intensely sweet and had no sugar. A tiny amount could sweeten food and drink far beyond what its size suggested. At first, the discovery sounded like a curiosity. Then, food companies, diabetics, dieters, and wartime shortages gave it a market. Saccharin became one of the first artificial sweeteners used widely by the public. The twist is that it began with terrible lab hygiene. A chemist carried his experiment to the dinner table on his own hands. The sweet taste did not come from a recipe. It came from contamination. That detail matters because many accidental discoveries are not clean stories. Sometimes the world changes because somebody notices the thing that should have been a mistake. Post-it notes. In 1968, Spencer Silver was trying to make a stronger glue. At 3M, stronger was the goal. Bigger bond. Tougher hold. More grip. He got the opposite. His adhesive stuck lightly, then peeled away cleanly. It could be reused. It did not tear paper. It did not leave much mess. In normal lab terms, that was a failure. A glue that does not glue hard is not a good glue. Silver kept talking about it anyway. For years, he told people inside 3M about his strange adhesive. It was a solution without a problem. Then Art Fry had an annoying little problem. He sang in a church choir, and his paper bookmarks kept falling out of his hymn book. A strong glue would ruin the pages. Silver's weak glue was perfect. It could hold the bookmark in place, then peel off without damage. That turned a failed adhesive into a new kind of note. The early product was not an instant global hit. 3M had to test it, market it, and convince people they needed sticky paper that could be moved around. Even the famous yellow color came from available paper nearby, not some grand design. But once people used it, the idea spread. Offices changed. Desks filled with reminders. Notes moved from folders to walls to refrigerators to computer screens. The glue failed at being strong, so it became useful. Some discoveries happen because a mistake works better than the plan. This one stuck lightly, and that is the pattern hiding behind all of these stories. None of them looked like world-changing science at first. They looked like problems. But someone stopped long enough to ask why. That is where the accident became discovery.